Hi there, I'm Sadie. And my father stood up in front of our entire extended family, raised his wine glass, and disowned me. After 7 years of paying their bills, covering their debts, and holding everything together, they decided I no longer fit their version of family. But that wasn't even the worst part. Want to know what they did next? What would you do if your family cut you off after you spent years saving them from collapse? What's the most heartbreaking thing a loved one has ever made you feel invisible for? What time are you listening to this? And where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. I'd really love to know. I arrived 10 minutes late on purpose. Not late enough to be rude, just enough to make a statement. Not that anyone noticed. No one stood up, no one waved. My father didn't even look up from his wine glass. My mother gave a lazy smile like I was just another guest she barely remembered inviting. The restaurant was one of those dimly lit places, with gold trim on the menus, and waiters who whispered. My mother liked it because the lighting made her look 10 years younger, and the valet made her feel like royalty. She chose this place every year, never for the food. I hovered for a moment at the end of the table, unsure where to sit. 12 people. Cousins I barely recognized. My sister Kendra, already halfway through a martini. 2 strangers. Probably mom's friends from yoga or bridge club. The only open seat was at the far corner next to the ficus. So I sat there, adjusted my dress, and smiled into the silence. No one asked how I was. No one asked anything. They talked around me. Kendra was gushing about her latest brand collab, even though I knew she was 3 months behind on rent. Dad made a few digs about people who don't know the value of hard work, which, as always, was aimed at me. Mom beamed at everyone like a gracious host on her own talk show. Then Dad tapped his glass. Everyone quieted. I braced for one of his recycled toasts, maybe something about love and legacy, but that's not what came out of his mouth. From this day forward, he said, smiling at Mom, we no longer consider Sadie part of this family. It was so casual, I thought I'd misheard. The air froze, a pause long enough for me to inhale, but not exhale. Then Kendra clapped. Softly at first, like she wasn't sure if she was supposed to. Then louder. Someone else joined in. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years raised her glass. Mom gave a pleased nod, like a queen approving a decree. Someone whispered. Finally. I heard none of it, only the throb in my ears, like I'd slipped underwater. I stared at my plate. There was a lemon wedge on the edge, meant for a dish I hadn't ordered. My hand was steady, but my stomach was not. My skin burned hot, though I hadn't moved. I thought about the things they wouldn't say aloud. How I paid off the second mortgage when Dad defaulted. How I covered Kendra's credit card debt 3 times. How I funded this very dinner. Reservation, wine pairings, even the stupid centerpiece made of roses and gold-painted pine cones. But none of that mattered. I wasn't family. I was a resource, an account that had finally been closed. I reached into my purse, found the key fob, the one for the SUV I bought them last Christmas, because Mom said their old car made them look low income. I laid it gently in the center of the table. Then I suppose you won't need this. No one moved, no one breathed. The waiter appeared with dessert menus, saw the tension, and backed away. I stood, pushed in my chair, and looked straight at my father. He blinked. Not in regret, just confusion, like he hadn't expected me to make this real. I didn't walk toward the door. I walked out of their narrative. By the time I got home, my feet had gone numb inside the heels I wore out of obligation, not preference. I left them by the door without unbuckling the straps. My purse slid off my shoulder onto the floor with a soft thud. The silence inside my apartment wasn't comforting. It just echoed back the kind I'd sat in for years. I sat down on the carpet, knees folded under me, not sure what I was reaching for until I reached for nothing. My phone lit up with a notification. Margot had posted. I wasn't following her anymore, but the algorithm knew I'd look anyway. It always knew. It was a photo. Christmas 3 years ago. A golden lit living room, tinsel over the fireplace, a roaring fire that had been looped from YouTube, everyone smiling in matching pajamas. Except I wasn't in the photo. I remembered that day. I remembered holding the phone to take the picture because no one wanted to deal with the timer. I remembered telling them to scoot in, to smile like they meant it. The caption read, "Holidays with everyone who matters most." At first I thought it might be a mistake, a crop, a filter. But no, there I wasn't. And for the first time I felt the cold truth land not in my chest, but somewhere deeper. Somewhere that didn't protest. Somewhere that just nodded and said, "Of course." I remembered everything I had done for that holiday. I bought the tree because theirs had snapped at the base the year before. I paid for the food because the joint family fund was mysteriously empty again. I wrapped every single gift, including the ones Kendra had ordered last minute and had delivered unwrapped. I didn't complain. I didn't even expect thanks, but I did expect to exist. That day, Margot had leaned in and whispered, "Don't mention what you paid for. You know your dad's pride." I didn't. I still don't. All I know is that pride looks a lot like control when you're standing outside the picture. Scrolling back through the comments, I saw names I recognized, people from church, from Kendra's influencer circles. Beautiful family. So blessed. You all look so happy. I wanted to laugh, but my throat stayed tight. Why did I keep doing it? Why did I keep funding their holidays, their dinners, their self-made legacies? Maybe I thought money was my way in. Maybe I believed if I kept giving, they'd eventually make room for me. A real seat, a real smile, a real place. But it was never about space. It was about silence. And I had provided it, consistently, thoroughly, at great expense. I stood up, walked over to the bookcase, and found the old family photo that sat behind a faded candle. It was from when I was 17. I was in it, barely, on the far left, half cut, like I was photobombing my own life. I slid the photo out of the frame, peeled myself off the paper, folded the edge so cleanly it looked intentional. Then I put the frame back on the shelf, empty. "Let's make it official," I whispered to no one. The envelope looked expensive, thick, cream-colored, with gold lettering that shimmered in the light. My last name embossed at the top like it meant something. I found it buried between a coupon flyer and a utility bill, and for a second, it almost made me feel chosen, until I opened it. The font was ornate, almost theatrical. It read, "You're invited to the Harrington Family Heritage Celebration. No time, no place, no RSVP, just nothing." It wasn't just incomplete, it was hollow. The air in my apartment was still. A warm summer breeze slipped in through the open kitchen window, but it didn't carry anything new, just the smell of old wood and quiet resentment. I called Kendra first. She answered on speakerphone, her voice echoing over what sounded like wine glasses and background music. "Oh, that?" she said between laughs. "Probably a misprint. Ask Mom." So I did. Margot's voice was flat, almost bored. "If you really want to be there," she said, "you'll find your way." Then she hung up. No explanation, no location. I stood there holding the invitation like it might transform in my hands, like some secret message would reveal itself if I squinted hard enough. But deep down, I already knew. I wasn't meant to come. That night, I scrolled through Instagram while sitting on the couch in an old sweatshirt, legs tucked under me. And there it was, Margot's latest post. A group photo from the celebration. Everyone was there. Ruben, Kendra, the cousins, the aunts, even the neighbor who always brought dry banana bread to family parties, all smiling under a banner I'd probably paid for. Her caption read, "Grateful for a full family heart today." I stared at the screen for a long time, didn't zoom in, didn't read the comments. I didn't need to, because I'd seen that photo before, in different shapes, different years, different excuses. But this one didn't even bother pretending I was late or out of frame. This one said it plain, "You don't exist here." I thought back to when I was 8, my birthday party. They forgot to invite my friends from school. Said the invites must have gotten lost. I remember sitting on the porch in a party dress, watching the sun go down as Mom told me to stop crying because at least family came. The pattern wasn't new. It was just no longer decorated. I pulled out my old planner from the bottom drawer of my desk, pages bent, stickers half peeled. Flipping through it, I passed years of scribbled appointments, fund transfers, payment reminders, venue bookings, and then I saw it. A yellow post-it stuck between pages from 2 Christmases ago. "Confirm address for Kendra's venue. Call by Thursday." I laughed, soft and bitter, like air escaping a leak. I wasn't invited. I was inventory. "I guess I've always been logistics," I whispered, not blood. It was a year ago, but the memory stays sharp, like the sound of a box cutter slicing through cardboard. I had picked up the cake myself. I remember the bakery, small, with a handwritten chalkboard menu, and the smell of cinnamon and butter hanging in the air. The woman behind the counter smiled when I showed her the message. "That's sweet," she said. It was more than sweet to me. It was precise, a sentence that took weeks to choose. "Thank you for always holding us together." It wasn't flashy, but it was honest. It was the kind of thing I'd never said aloud. Not really. Not since I started footing every bill, but still got called dramatic for asking for kindness. I kept the box on my lap the whole ride there. The party was loud, cluttered with too many people who didn't listen, and too much wine for a midday brunch. Kendra was already tipsy. Ruben was working the room like he was running for something. Margot wore a silk blouse she hadn't taken the tags off. When it was time for the cake, someone dimmed the lights. I stood near the edge, watching as they carried it out like a crown. And then I saw it. The message on the cake had been changed. Instead of what I wrote, it read, "Family is everything." My breath caught. It was a beautiful script, maybe even neater than the original, but it wasn't mine. Kendra giggled, raising her glass. "I made a little edit. Yours felt a bit heavy, you know? We're keeping it light." Light, of course. Everyone laughed. I didn't. I just watched the candles flicker and felt the back of my throat tighten. Later that evening, when most guests had gone and the empty wine bottles lined the counter like trophies, I found Margot rinsing dishes. I asked, quiet and low, "Did you know Kendra changed the message?" She didn't flinch. She meant well. It was prettier this way. More neutral. I nodded, not because I agreed, but because I was already exhausted. Pretty, neutral, easy to swallow. That's how my love was expected to be. Palatable, marketable, framed in a way that didn't disrupt the narrative. The truth wasn't welcome at our table, unless it could be frosted over and piped in cursive. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan turning slow circles. I thought about all the times I had rewritten myself. Smaller, quieter, less needy. I thought about how even when I spoke, my words were airbrushed into something prettier. And for what? So no one would call me difficult? So they could keep clapping and smiling while slicing through a cake that said nothing real? A week later, I went back to that same bakery. The woman remembered me. I asked for the same message as last year. She didn't ask questions, just nodded and slid the order slip across the counter. This time, when I picked up the cake, I didn't bring it to anyone's party. I brought it home, sat at my small kitchen table, lit one candle, cut one slice. "This one doesn't need approval," I whispered, and took the first bite. It had taken me weeks to plan it. I researched the touring dates, cross-checked everyone's schedules, prepaid for a pre-theater dinner reservation at a place Margot liked because they served cocktails in teacups. I booked orchestra seats for all four of us, not balcony, not mezzanine, center orchestra, row G. Close enough to see expressions, far enough not to strain your neck, the perfect distance. I thought maybe we'd finally meet there. The day arrived with the first breath of fall in Tacoma. Cool air, crunchy leaves, that smell of shifting seasons in every gust of wind. I wore a dress I hadn't touched in 2 years. It still fit. Somehow that felt like a win. At 5:42 p.m., Ruben texted, "Not feeling great, might skip tonight." At 5:47 p.m., Kendra wrote, "Crap, I totally forgot. I'm recording a live Quanda at 8, super important." At 6:01 p.m., Margot pulled up to the curb and rolled down the passenger window. She didn't get out. "Well," she said, her voice chirpy and tight, "just us girls." The drive was quiet. She talked about a new supplement she was testing, something about turmeric and collagen and energy alignment. I nodded at all the right times. Or maybe not. I was already somewhere else. At the theater, I stepped forward to confirm the reservation while Margot disappeared into the restroom. The clerk looked up at me, kind but cautious. "Hi, Miss Harrington. So sorry, but the 3 additional tickets were canceled this morning. Refund processed, different card." The words came slowly, but the meaning was instant. This wasn't forgetfulness. It was a maneuver. I stood there for a few beats too long. Then I smiled, thanked him, handed over my ID, and took the one remaining ticket. No dinner, no family, just me and seat G13. The velvet seat was soft. The room buzzed with pre-show energy, couples whispering, kids dressed up for their first musical, the kind of noise that makes you feel alone in new ways. I stared at the stage, but mostly at the 3 empty seats beside me. Row G, seats 10 through 12. The ones I had picked with care, left untouched. They didn't forget. They planned this. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. Once, then again. I didn't check. Maybe it was a calendar reminder. Maybe it was one of them pretending something had come up. I wasn't going to play along anymore. They hadn't said the words, but this was louder than language. They didn't want me there. Not really. They wanted what I provided. Access, credit cards, logistics, the sense of family without the reality of me. And now, without any of that, I was disposable. Still, I didn't cry. I watched the curtain rise. I let the music wash over me like a tide. And somewhere in that opening number, I drew a line in the sand, a silent promise to myself. This was the last time I waited for people who were never coming. I had gone quiet on purpose. No more deposits, no more reminders, no more phone calls where Margot hinted about her medicine being so expensive, or Ruben grumbled about the cost of Kendra's failed ventures. I stopped answering texts. I didn't send a holiday group message. I didn't offer excuses, and they didn't ask. At first, the silence felt foreign, like I'd left the stove on in someone else's house and was waiting for a fire that never came. But after a few weeks, it started to feel like something closer to peace. Like I'd finally stopped feeding a machine that never acknowledged me as anything but a fuel source. Then came the envelope. I was at work, reviewing contracts at my desk, when the front receptionist buzzed my phone. "There's a courier here, legal service." My stomach flipped. I walked to the lobby, signed the form, took the envelope. Back at my desk, I sat for a moment just holding it. Inside, a lawsuit, filed by Ruben and Margot, allegation, financial abuse of elderly dependents. I didn't laugh, not out loud, but something inside me cracked, sharp, dry, hollow, like biting into a stale pastry and realizing it never had filling to begin with. They claimed I'd used undue influence to coerce them into joint accounts, that I wielded financial control over family assets, that I restricted their access to their own funds. They forgot the part where those funds only existed because I created them. That night, I pulled out every folder, every statement I'd kept tucked away over the years. Not because I thought I'd ever need them, but because something in me always knew. I found it buried in an email chain from 2 years ago, a second mortgage application, under my name, my digital signature attached. The loan was approved, of course. Why wouldn't it be? I had perfect credit. The same credit Margot once said was our family's safety net. The lender was familiar, one of Margot's old friends from her brief stint in real estate. The payments were made sporadically, mostly from an account I hadn't accessed in 18 months. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was theft. But it wasn't just the loan. It was the betrayal stitched between the lines. The way they didn't even bother to ask, knowing I wouldn't have said no. That was the part that broke me more than any form or signature. I didn't cry. I called my lawyer. Then I printed everything. Every invoice, every Venmo receipt, every mortgage draft and wire transfer. I sorted them by date, by amount, by who asked and who pretended they never did. And I made a timeline. It started on the day I turned 25 and agreed to co-sign Ruben's credit card just until he sorted some things out. It ended with the mortgage. They had built an entire system around my silence, and I had finally shut it off. The next morning, I sent a single-line email to Margot. "We're going to do this by the book then." Attached, a PDF labeled Family Financial Ledger, annotated. The subject line, request for itemized justification. I didn't expect a reply, but I knew she read it. The invitation wasn't printed. It wasn't gold embossed or mailed in a padded envelope. It was a text from Aunt Viola. "Come to the house, it's time." I knew what she meant, and I knew who would be there. Viola's living room smelled like lemon oil and old wood. No candles, no wine glasses, just a circle of folding chairs that creaked when people shifted. Esther sat to my left, quiet, hands folded in her lap. Across from her was Dorian, holding a folder that looked too thick for comfort. Sadie Cray leaned against the wall, arms crossed, not closed off, just bracing. These were the people who had disappeared from birthdays, holidays, family newsletters. People I hadn't seen since they quietly slipped away, labeled dramatic, difficult, unstable. They weren't unstable, they were just tired. One by one, they spoke. Dorian pulled out old emails, investment pitches Ruben had sent, filled with promises and fake terms. "I lost 8,000, he said flatly. No apology, just silence. Esther talked about how her name was never mentioned again after her divorce. Her Christmas card photo was cropped the year after. They said it was just a layout decision. Screenshots were passed around. Group texts, side comments, marginal notes from people who once smiled wide in group hugs. It wasn't about me. It never was. It was about control, about pruning the branches that didn't grow the way they wanted. When it came to my turn, no one asked me to speak. They just looked. I opened my bag and took out the envelope. Not sealed with wax or tied in ribbon, just plain, manila, and heavy. I placed it in the center of the coffee table. Inside, notarized letters terminating all legal, financial, and personal ties. I didn't speak for long. "No more performances," I said, then sat back. There was no applause, no gasps, just a shared breath, a collective moment of someone finally saying it out loud. Later, Viola hugged me tightly. Esther wiped her eyes. Dorian whispered, "I should have done this 10 years ago." I drove home with the windows cracked, letting in the cold air of November. It didn't sting. It cleared the air inside my car. That night, Ruben called, 3 times. I let it ring, then I blocked the number. Not out of hate, but because some stories don't deserve a sequel. The message came on a Wednesday morning. No subject line, just an image attachment and a quiet "thought of you." It was from Sadie Cray. I hadn't spoken to her since the meeting at Viola's house, when we all sat in that circle of folding chairs and finally told the truth aloud. She'd listened more than she spoke, nodding slowly, eyes on the carpet. But this message, landed like something far heavier than silence. I opened the image. A photo, a barbecue in the Harrington backyard, maybe 13 years ago. You could tell by the clothes, long denim skirts, sandals with socks, polo shirts tucked too tight. Everyone was there, lined up in front of the grill, paper plates in hand, and in the corner, blurred, nearly cropped out, was me. I squinted, my face half turned, holding a stack of napkins. I wasn't smiling. I wasn't looking at the camera. I wasn't posed, but I was there. Sadie's message said, "You were always in the frame, even when they pretended you weren't. I saved this one for you." I stared at it for a long time, not because it was beautiful. It wasn't. The lighting was bad, the angle worse, but it told the truth. I hadn't imagined the erasure. I hadn't created a false narrative to victimize myself. I was always there. They had just taught themselves not to look. I printed the photo that afternoon, not to frame it, not to share it. I taped it behind the cabinet door above my coffee mugs, the one I opened every morning without thinking. The one place I knew I'd see it, quietly, daily, like a scar you no longer wince at but still trace with your thumb. "I was there," I whispered, even if they couldn't admit it. Later that evening, I sat at my laptop and opened a blank email. I titled it, "Final Reconciliation Summary, Legal and Financial Termination Confirmed." I attached everything: bank statements, withdrawal receipts, canceled checks, notarized filings. I didn't explain any of it, didn't soften the wording. The final line read, "You no longer owe me anything, but you will remember what I gave." And I hit send. I didn't wait for a reply. That was never the point. Then I powered down my phone and set it face down on the kitchen table. Grabbed my coat. The cold outside bit at my cheeks, but it didn't chase me back in. For once, the silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like permission. No calls, no emails, not even a passive-aggressive forwarded article about forgiveness or toxic boundaries. Just silence. At first, it felt like standing in the middle of a room where a fight had just happened. You brace for something, shattered glass, a slammed door, footsteps returning with more things to say. But nothing came. And slowly, the tension in my shoulders stopped asking for the next blow. The photo still sat on the kitchen table, face down. I hadn't touched it since I printed it. Hadn't even moved the coaster that sat beside it. It lived in that space now, like it had claimed a corner of my life that no longer needed explaining. I was making coffee when my phone buzzed, an old voicemail notification that had somehow slipped past the delete folder. I played it before I could think. It was Ruben. His voice cracked in the middle, but not with emotion. More like someone trying to sound composed for a jury that never showed up. "We didn't raise you to be cruel." Click. I didn't listen to it again. I didn't save it. I deleted it, not because it hurt, but because it didn't matter anymore. Some echoes don't need replaying to be silenced. I walked over to the drawer where I kept my documents, pulled out a copy of the notarized letter, the one I had handed over at Viola's, still sealed the last I heard. No rejection, no acknowledgement, just unopened. But the thing about truth, it doesn't need permission to exist. It doesn't beg to be accepted. It just sits there, unchanged, while everyone else decides what to do with their denial. Later that day, I got a text from a friend. "Potluck at my place. You in?" I didn't hesitate. I baked an apple crumble from scratch, wrapped it in a towel, and drove with the windows cracked open to let in the sharp winter air. There were no last-minute cancellations, no forgotten RSVPs, just music, mismatched plates, laughter that didn't rely on bloodlines. Turns out, family isn't just who you're born into, it's who shows up without asking you to shrink. When I got home that evening, the house was warm with leftovers and leftover peace. I passed the table again. The photo, still there. But something had changed. It was now face up, under a glass paperweight, crooked and faded. I saw myself at the edge of that family barbecue, blurry, barely there, but still there. I picked it up, held it between my fingers and whispered, "That's enough." Then I placed it back down, right side up, and walked into the quiet like it was finally mine. Sometimes what frees us isn't a grand gesture, it's a quiet decision. A moment when you stop asking to be seen and start choosing where to stand. I spent years trying to earn a place in a family that was happy to keep me useful but invisible. And the truth is, no amount of sacrifice will ever be enough for people committed to not seeing your worth. If you're walking through something like this, feeling erased, replaced, or just quietly excluded, I hope my story reminds you, you don't need permission to choose peace. You don't need applause to know your worth. So let me ask you, have you ever been in a room full of people who made you feel completely alone? What did you do? How did you take your power back? Leave me a comment below. If this story hit home, type 1 in the comments or share where you're watching from. And if you didn't connect with it, tell me why. I want to hear all perspectives. And of course, if you found this video meaningful, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story. Because somewhere out there, another person is learning how to stand up without raising their voice. And maybe they need to hear this too.